Chucky has always been a horror legend. It's been over 40 years since this psychotic killer doll has been leaving a trail of bodies at every new place he invades. Now, of course, when the name Chucky comes to mind, you immediately think of a plastic-faced, 3-foot-tall, ginger-haired, beady-eyed murderer who loves to curse. But does the name Charles Lee Ray ring any bells? He first appeared in the 1988 film that began the Chucky franchise, and though we didn't see much of him except for his transition, over the course of 8 films and a TV series, a lot of crucial information about Charles Lee Ray has been shown, some of which you might have missed. So without wasting another moment, let's discuss Ray's life before he became a serial killer doll. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How did Charles Lee Ray transfer his soul inside a good guy toy? Well, to actually understand the history of Chucky's human counterpart in chronological order, we should first circle back to the Curse of Chucky. Here, we got a real glimpse of the events that led to what happened in Child's Play 1. Charles always lived dual lives, one as a serial killer and the other as an ordinary day-to-day person. One day, one of his friends took him to a party and introduced him to Sarah. Now, Sarah was heavily pregnant, and ever since Charles met her, he was obsessed. He went on to look after Sarah's daughter, Barb, and complimented her on having her mother's eyes. Eventually, he started planning to replace Sarah's husband. So one night, he offered Daniel a ride home, and on the way home, he ended up drowning him. A few days later, after Daniel's funeral, he kidnapped Sarah and kept her tied up in his hideout, while his partner Eddie waited outside in their van. He filled up the shady room with sunflowers, and insisted on picking Barb up from her daycare. But Sarah, trying to keep her daughter safe, requests some more time alone with him. This pisses Charles off. He calls her selfish for not wanting to share him with Barb, or their new unborn baby. In the very next moment, the police arrive to quickly surround the safe house, which makes Charles realize why she's been trying to stop him. Feeling betrayed, he accuses Sarah of destroying their so-called family and stabs her in the stomach, clearly hurting the baby inside. As Sarah bled to death, her killer left the hideout, hoping to reach his partner, Eddie, and the scene brings us to the events of the first Chucky film, Child's Play. While trying to run away, Charles is stuck in the tense shootout with Detective Mike Norris, who shoots him in the leg. Meanwhile, as Officer Jack Santos closed in, Eddie had no choice but to abandon him and run away. Left with limited options, Charles then sought refuge at a nearby toy store, but his confrontation with Mike proved fatal. Now that he was facing imminent death, Charles remembered the soul-transferring ritual his voodoo mentor, John, had taught him. However, with no one else close by to switch souls with, Charles had to make a desperate decision to use a good guy doll. After vowing to seek revenge on his enemies and his betrayer, Charles used his Heart of Dambella amulet to transfer his essence into the doll. As fate would have it, lightning struck the store shortly after, and Mike discovered Charles' lifeless body, unaware of the bizarre ritual that had just taken place. And well, kids, that's how Charles Lee Ray became the murderous good guy doll you've all come to love so much.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
Charles Lee Ray was a born killer. You know, not everyone is meant for the corporate hustle. Some have a knack for the arts. Like for me, I always knew I wanted to do something around films, TV shows, and comics. But I guess for Charles, the idea of watching guts slash open and blood spill always fascinated him. The Chucky TV show did a banger job in showing us Charles Lee Ray's screwed up past life in a series of flashbacks. The first flashback came in Season 1, taking us to 1965, when a 7-year-old Charles returned home from a night of Halloween trick-or-treating. Amongst almost all the chocolates he got, Charles picked up the apple in his loot, only to discover a razor blade hidden inside. Still unfazed, he goes on to take a bite from the apple, and simply grins while feeling the sharp edge slice into his mouth, slowly drawing blood. In the next flashback scene, Chucky reflects on the first life he ever took, reminiscing the thrill that came with it. It was during his birthday, when Charles toppled a piñata with a mallet, and went on to aggressively smash it even after it fell. He then overhears a radio bulletin announcing a serial killer on the loose, and then turns back to enjoying plunging a knife into his birthday cake. On the same night, Charles woke up to find out that the same serial killer had broken into his home and killed his father, Peter. Before his mother, Elizabeth, could take him away and hide in a closet, he snuck in a pocket knife. It wasn't long before the serial killer found out their hiding place, and what the guy saw after opening the closet door shocked us all. Charles had already killed his own mother by stabbing her because he wanted to help the killer. The man is impressed by the boy's instincts, and goes on to advise him how a good murderer always covers their tracks. With a deft hand, he cleans the blood off Charles' pocket knife, before leaving behind a chilling legacy in the boy's young psyche. Now, although this flashback was shown in Chucky Season 2, I would still like to mention it beforehand, for the sake of chronological explanation. So this flashback took us back to 1965, just after Charles had killed his mother. He was now living at Burlington Home for Wayward Boys in South Jersey, where he met a therapist named Dr. Amanda Mixter, who literally does the very opposite of what her job demands of her. Amanda pushes Charles to become his worst self. In fact, she admires his violent nature and decides to encourage his murderous tendencies by removing any hint of innocence or naivety left in his head. During their sessions, she asks him if he planned to kill his mother or if it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. After asking Charles about his favorite method of killing, he told her how he enjoys both planned and spontaneous killings, but finds spontaneous ones to be the most enjoyable. Coming back to another flashback scene of Charles' early life as a boy, in 1972, when he was only 14, Charles tried to influence 3 other boys to join his dark path by teaching them how to swear and telling them twisted fairy tales where the focus is on murder. One day, while running around the house, the janitor scolds Charles for messing up the clean floor with his muddy sneakers, and goes on to drench his only pair of shoes with a dirty mop. Of course, this makes Charles furious, and so, in retaliation, he uses his pocket knife to murder the janitor and hide his body in the nearby forest. A few days later, Charles takes his group of 3 boys on an adventure inspired by Peter Pan, pretending to hunt down Captain Hook. He leads them through the forest to the place where he hid the janitor's body, and tells them that the janitor is Captain Hook, only after chopping off the dead dude's hand and stabbing a hook inside the stump. While 2 boys get scared and run away, Eddie Caputo stays by Charles' side. The same night, when the police arrive to investigate the janitor's death at the Burlington home, Charles is forced to run away before getting caught. But before leaving, he bids farewell to Eddie and gives him the janitor's severed hand as a strange parting gift.
You should be Chucky.
You know what, Tiff?
How does Charles become Chucky? Season 1's 4th flashback took us to 1986, where Charles was seen enjoying a nightclub, probably waiting for his next kill. Here, he met a woman named Delilah, and later picked up another red-haired woman before going back to the Hackensack Hotel. In the hotel room, Charles watches as the 2 women kiss on the bed, and then goes on to grab the red-haired woman by the neck, after holding a knife to her head. But the killer is thrown off his game when she encourages him to go through with it. A hesitant Charles stabs Delilah in the stomach instead, and then passes the knife to the red-haired woman, allowing her to finish Delilah off. Pumped up by the kill, they jump on the bed and start making out. The woman introduces herself as Tiffany and suggests that Charles should go by the name Chucky. So kids, that's how you know true love really exists. Later, Charles and Tiffany go on to become a couple, flying off into the horizon, killing people together. A year later, they go into a car dealership looking to buy a Pontiac. While Charles was busy mocking the salesman, Tiffany snuck up behind to slit the guy's throat with her nail filer. After the guy was dead, they took the keys from him, hopping into their new car and drove towards Chicago while Charles read a new book on voodoo. In another flashback, we see Charles and Tiffany living together in a Chicago apartment. One night after their pizza is successfully delivered, they kill the delivery guy together and hide his body in the bathroom. Later, Tiffany goes out somewhere and returns to find Charles murdering some woman without her. This makes her visibly upset, almost as if Charles was cheating on her. Apparently, killing is something they do together, but Charles dismisses her, saying he has a life of his own beyond their relationship. Fed up with Tiffany's constant whining, Charles puts on his coat and storms out of the apartment. But as they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Without letting him know, Tiffany goes on to make a call to Mike Norris, providing him with all the information about Charles and his lifelong murder spree. Is Charles Lee Ray making a comeback in the Chucky TV show? Well, if you've been following the TV show lately, you already know that Chucky has been on death row for a while now. The killer doll has fallen out of Dambella's good graces, which means that all the supernatural powers that fueled him once before have now forsaken his plastic body. Chucky has been rapidly aging since the initial half of Season 3. His hair has been falling, face has been cracking, and the body has been gradually withering. Even though he tries to make a sacrificial offering to Dambella inside the White House, the voodoo deity seems to have turned away from Chucky for good, which means the soul of Charles Lee Ray is trapped inside the withering good guy doll. Over the course of 7 films, it's been shown that Chucky's plastic body is more human-like than we think. He has all the organs that a normal human body has, and it was probably his human soul which allowed him to keep his human-like appearance intact. Starting from the 2nd film, we saw how each time he died, Chucky could simply transfer his soul into a new doll. but this also meant that his soul did not come fresh from a human body anymore. That's why in later movies and the TV series, he automatically has human features like blood, veins, and strength, while still looking like a doll. Anyways, after the voodoo deity had turned his back on Chucky, he suffered an existential wave, only to be gifted by Tiffany to follow his true path. Chucky then planned on going out in a blaze of glory by killing the president, stealing the nuclear code from his body, and then going on to launch a third world war. Luckily, he was stopped in time by Coop, one of the White House guards. Although Coop shot Chucky through the heart, the doll still managed to launch a missile toward the North Pole before dying and turning to dust. Now, this is where Charles comes into play, because while the other characters are raging in the chaos that Chucky left behind, the ghost of a very old Charles Lee Ray appeared in the hallway, creepily smiling. If we've known anything from Season 3, it's that the White House is severely haunted, so I'm guessing the era of Charles being a menace without being stuck inside some doll is behind us. In fact, this time it has the possibility of getting even worse for the show's human characters, given that Charles can carry out his killing spree while remaining invisible to the human eye. What do you guys think about the return of Old Man Charles? Let us know in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!